Back in early 1991, something happened that had never happened before. The entire world was basically glued to their TVs, watching a war unfold live, right from the front lines. And this wasn't some old, grainy newsreel footage. Nope, this was happening in real time, 24/7, and it completely changed how we see conflict. Okay, let's get into it. And that was the defiant roar from Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. I mean, you've got this massive coalition of 42 different countries, led by the US, gathering on his border, and he's promising the fight of a lifetime. And what was the coalition's goal? Simple: to kick his army out of the tiny, oil-rich nation it had just invaded months before, Kuwait. For so many people watching this from their living rooms, it got a nickname: the Video Game War. And you can see why, right? Night after night, the news would show this footage from cameras mounted on stealth bombers, on precision-guided missiles. You'd see these green-tinted crosshairs lock onto a target, and then, poof, a silent explosion. It felt so detached, almost clean, and this CNN effect, as it came to be known, shaped how everyone felt about the war in a way that had just never been possible before. So, how did it even get to this point? Well, to really understand this war, you gotta rewind the clock a bit. The seeds for this whole conflict were planted years earlier, in the fallout of another really brutal war, the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq War. I mean, just look at that number. The scale of the debt here is just mind-boggling. After that long, devastating war with Iran, Iraq was, for all intents and purposes, bankrupt, and it owed 14 times billion dollars to its tiny next-door neighbor, Kuwait. Saddam Hussein basically told Kuwait, hey, you should forgive that debt, we just protected you from Iran. But Kuwait said no. So the tension just skyrocketed. Saddam started accusing Kuwait of waging economic war against him by pumping too much oil, which drove the global price down and cost Iraq billions. And then he made another claim, that they were literally stealing Iraqi oil by slant drilling under the border. Finally, on August 2nd, 1990, all the talking stopped. Over 100,000 Iraqi troops stormed across the border, and they swallowed the entire country of Kuwait in just 2 days. The world's reaction to the invasion was immediate and pretty much universal. This wasn't just some regional squabble anymore. This was a clear act of aggression, and it threatened the stability of the whole Middle East, not to mention the world's oil supply. And the United Nations moved fast. Step 1, they condemned the invasion. Step 2, they hit Iraq with crippling economic sanctions. And then came the big one, Step 3. In November 1990, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 678. It was a crystal clear ultimatum. Get out of Kuwait by January 15th or prepare to be removed by force. The countdown to war was officially on, and the massive military buildup known as Operation Desert Shield was already well underway. And the scale of the response, it was just immense. We're talking about the largest military alliance since World War II. You had over 950,000 troops from 42 nations, big players like the US, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all gathering in the desert. Now, if you looked at the numbers, Iraq's army looked huge, right? But what it was about to face was a technologically superior and truly global military force. That January 15th deadline, it came and it went. Saddam Hussein did not move his troops. And just like that, Operation Desert Shield, which was all about defending Saudi Arabia, transformed into Operation Desert Storm, the mission to liberate Kuwait. The first phase was just a staggering display of air power. For 42 straight days and nights, coalition aircraft hammered Iraqi targets. We're talking command centers, air defenses, supply lines, anything and everything. They were basically blinding and crippling the Iraqi military before a single ground troop even set foot across the border. Air supremacy wasn't just a goal, it was an absolute reality. So what was Iraq's main response? Firing these old Soviet-made Scud missiles. Now, the strategy here was actually pretty clever in a dangerous way. Saddam wasn't trying to win militarily with these things. He was firing them at Israel, a country that wasn't even in the coalition. Why? He was hoping to bait Israel into striking back. If Israel attacked Iraq, Saddam figured the Arab nations in the coalition would have to leave. But under some serious pressure from the US, Israel held its fire, and the coalition stayed together. Okay, so after more than a month of this relentless air campaign, the ground war kicked off. On February 24th, hundreds of thousands of coalition troops and thousands of tanks surged across the border into Kuwait and Iraq. They executed this massive left hook strategy that came out of the desert and completely blindsided the Iraqi army. And what happened next was, well, it was incredible. The ground war, the part that many people thought could turn into a long, bloody stalemate, was over in just 100 hours. Think about that. The Iraqi army, already beaten down by the air war and now totally outmaneuvered on the ground, just collapsed. Kuwait was free, and the Iraqi Republican Guard, Saddam's absolute best troops, was completely shattered. A ceasefire was called on February 28th. The war was officially over. But here's the thing. While the fighting was remarkably short, the aftermath would cast a very long and very complicated shadow over the entire region for decades. As they pulled out, Iraqi forces set fire to hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells, creating a massive environmental disaster. There was controversy over the bombing of a miles-long convoy of retreating Iraqis, a scene of total devastation that became known as the Highway of Death. For the next 10 years, Iraq was choked by sanctions, and thousands of veterans came home with a mysterious sickness that was eventually called Gulf War Syndrome. But maybe most importantly, Saddam Hussein was left in power. This feeling of unfinished business created a decade of simmering conflict that led directly to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The Gulf War absolutely redrew the map for modern warfare. It showed the world the power of technology and international cooperation, and it achieved its main goal with unbelievable speed and with relatively few coalition casualties. But when you look at the instability, the conflicts that followed, and the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East, it leaves you with one big, lingering question.